When the user sends you the slash sign in endpoint, request on the slash sign in endpoint with their username and their password, what do? You take their username and you somehow encrypt it into a token. You send them back the token. Now, when the user sends you a request to the slash me endpoint with the token, what do? यहाँ पे you decode using this token. You can decrypt this token back to the user name. You do whatever you want with that information. Okay, what are their courses? For the courses, you will eventually have to hit the database. Okay, what all courses does this user have? But at least the user decoding happens directly on the server. It doesn't propagate to the database. Your user decoding, your token decoding becomes stateless. That is what JWTs are used for. That is sort of, the use case slash why you might want to use a JWT compared to the logic we had already written. Let's go back and understand JWTs. JWTs or JSON Web Tokens are a compact and self-contained way to represent information between two parties. They are not similar to encryption. We are going to learn about a lot of gotchas when it comes to JWTs. So never compare JWTs with encryption. I gave a very simple example here. You can encrypt, but they're a little different. Let's understand how they're different. JWTs are a compact, self-contained way. What does self-contained mean? Inside the JWT, the user ID, the username is contained. Way to represent information between two parties. That is exactly what we want. If there are two parties, we want information to be shared between the parties. Information being who is this user. They are commonly used for authentication and information exchange in web applications. JWTs are stateless. JWTs contain all the information needed to authenticate a request so that the server does not need to store session data. We will not need to store this information that we were storing in the slash sign in endpoint in this found user.token. We will not have to store data over here in the sign in endpoint. Right now, the sign in endpoint updates the user's needed to authenticate a request so that the server does not need to store session data. We will not need to store this information that we were storing in the slash sign in endpoint in this found user.token. We will not have to store data over here in the sign in endpoint. Right now, the sign in endpoint updates the user's variable. We will make sure that does not happen. We don't have to store the session data. All the data is stored in the token itself. So token hoga, this JWT itself has the data. Your server will just verify or somehow decode data. Do we understand the benefits of JWT, why you might want to use it before we start to write the code for it? Do we understand how JWTs are different from the tokens that we had already created? You know, the tokens that we had created were stateful, which means we had to store some data in the server or in the database for them. JWTs are stateless, which means the JWT itself is going to store the data. When we write the code, it will become even easier to understand because we'll actually see what the token looks like. But before that, high level समझ आया difference between token and JWT? ये तो किसी को नहीं समझ आया बाप रे. मतलब 75% understand. Okay, let's do a small 5-minute break. That's fine. You know, I think this will become easier after we write the code. But okay, let's look at Q&A for a bit and see what's up. Basically, databases don't get much load by using JWT. You can say that. A bunch of other things, right? Okay, JWTs, let's say, get decoded faster. They may or may not, but you know, I'm just trying to think of why you might want to use this over that. The biggest reason is you don't want to overwhelm the database. And you know, JWTs, you skip the hop to the database. You don't have to send a request to the database. So JWT essentially prevent one round trip from the backend server to the database for a user request. Perfect explanation. What is the explanation? That the anonymous attendee over here gave us that is one benefit. JWTs are something that are used for something, but what is the benefit of using JWTs? This is the perfect way to summarize it. Okay, JWTs essentially prevents one round trip from the backend server and the database for any user request. Please explain JWT again. What is the difference between cookie and JWT? You are comparing the wrong things. You don't compare cookies and JWT. It's like comparing Java and water. They're different things. You compare cookies and auth headers. Okay, what is the cookie here? What is the auth header? And the answer is, you know, we can discuss this in more detail when we reach cookies. But basically, you know, in Postman, I was sending the request in this token header. I could have sent it in this authorization header, or I can send it in a cookie header. So cookie is just another header. But there is one special property of cookie. Okay, you know, the browsers automatically set them in the header. When you go to app.headexdev.com, did I somewhere in the over here write $header equal to cookie equal to some token? I did not write. It automatically got added. That is why cookies are beneficial in case of browsers. You know, cookies are a special header compared to all the other headers that we're discussing, specifically on the auth header. And JWTs, you know, how the token is created. So you can have a JWT stored in a cookie, or you can have a JWT stored in a auth header as well. These are the two things, you know, sort of compare the differences between. And JWTs are, you know, one way for you to create tokens. Is it encrypted or not? It is not encrypted. It is sort of encoded. It's encoded, not encrypted, exactly. So it is not encrypted. We'll see this eventually in the slides that are coming. But yes, it is not similar to encryption. JWT does something else. So if you introduce JWT, then there is no significance of database. Well, sir, if this is your front end and this is your back end, you will still need the database, right? If you are creating app.100xdevs.com, at least the course information is stored over here. Courses ki information is stored over here. Authentication ke liye, yes, you skipped a step. You don't need the database for it. But the course information is here. Purchase information is here. Video information is here. So you need the database for something else. You answered. Please send your question. So someone sent this message. The problem with this message is I don't know what the question was. So you should send the question along. So JWT uses your data and your token. Stores your data. JWT does store your data. You still hit the database with JWT to authenticate and decrypt username and password. You don't. Password, yes. No, you don't, right? You still have to hit the database with the JWT to authenticate and decrypt username and password. Not exactly. Great question. And you know, this probably explains one fundamental flaw in your understanding JWT, which is on your tokens. Okay, this is your backend. This is your front end. Let me base the question that the person put as well. So next question. It's a very nice fundamental question, which is this thing right here. The question says, you still have to hit the database with the JWT to authenticate decrypted usernames and password. They said, when the request is coming to the /me endpoint here, and let's say there is this token with it, you can decrypt the token over here. It will give you back the username. And they say, Yeah, आपको username password मिल जाएगा from the token. You can get back username and password from this token, but you still have to hit the database to authenticate the username and password. The answer is no. Firstly, you don't get username and password. You just get username. This token is just a representation of this username. This username को somehow you encrypt, encode, whatever you do to create a random string. It's not really random. We'll come to what that means. But you convert this from this. As long as this decodes to a username, you are good to go. You don't need to hit the database again. Let me share the whole workflow one more time. Let me recap everything in the JWT approach. This is our front end. This is our back end. And let's discuss a little bit, not too much, about databases also. This is our database. First request comes to sign up. Someone comes and wants to sign up on our platform. What do? We store their information in the database. So we do one database call over here to store their username and password in our database. We let the user know, okay, hey, you are good to go, you have signed up. Then comes the first important request, /sign in. The request that comes is /sign in. This gives me the username and password. And again, I check in the database, okay, is this username and password valid? If it is, I return back to the user a JWT. What do I return back to the user? A token. This token is nothing but a representation of their username. We take their username, and somehow encrypt it, encode it, do something with it, create a JWT. That JWT is what we return to the user. This does not have their password. It doesn't need to have their password. It should not have their password. Just has a username. Now, in every subsequent request that the user sends me, let's say they send a request to the /me endpoint, they just need to send me the JWT, and my server will be able to, from the JWT, it will be able to get back the original username. And it knows, यार ये JWT जिसके पास है, whoever has this JWT has in the past signed in, right? Whoever has this JWT has signed in the past. So I don't have to re-verify from the database the username and password. No, this JWT was like a token that I give them. As long as they have this token, I can say that this is indeed that user that has this username. I convert their JWT to the username, and now I might have to hit the database. What are their courses? What is their first name? What is their last name? But I don't have to hit it to authenticate them. The token isn't stored in the database. But of course, all the other information is still stored in the database. So to answer your question, which was, it's a nice question. This one right here. The question was, you still have to hit the database with the JWT. No. To authenticate the decrypted username and password. So there is no decrypted password. Only the username gets decoded. And once you have this username, you don't need to hit the database. You know indeed that this is that person only, because in step 2 over here, you are the one who gave them the JWT, right? Yahan pe they gave you the username and password. That is good enough. They don't have to resend their username and password. They just have to resend the token that you had returned to them, so that you can authenticate that token again and again. Do we understand JWTs now? Implementation of JWTs is a little weird. We will see how you can convert a username to a JWT. How can you convert a JWT back to a username? But do we understand high level what is happening? Now we do understand. 90%, 89%, 86%. Not too bad. Let's do a little bit more coding. Then, happy to answer more doubts. Let's start to replace our token logic with JWTs a little bit. Let's start to make sure that we are not creating our own custom token. We are creating this JSON web token thingy, whatever that is. It is similar to encryption, but it is not encryption. It is something called encoding. It is not encryption. What does that mean, Hakirat? We will come to as we reach a few slides after this one. First, let's write the code to change our code base. What does our code base currently look like? Our code base currently looks something like this. There is a generate token function. There are 3. Endpoints over here. Can I get rid of the generate token function? I'm not going to write my own logic anymore. I'm going to use JWTs. JSON web token is a proper protocol that someone has written. On top of that protocol, there are NPM libraries. There are libraries which expose functions to you. Functions like, let's say JWT.encrypt, let's say, or JWT.decrypt. So we can just use these functions. I don't need this function anymore. Hopefully that's clear. I'm not doing encryption and decryption myself. So I can get rid of this function completely. What else do I have to do? Let's add the JSON web token library as a dependency to our code base. So I'm going to go to my code base and add npm install JSON web token. And now I can just use this library. Step 2, get rid of the generate token function. I already did that. Create a JWT secret variable. I said it is not encryption, but it is close to encryption. When you are encrypting something, what do you do? When you are encrypting something, let's say this is a username, harkirat@gmail.com. You encrypt it using a key. If you remember from the Web3 classes, you encrypt it using a key, and this spits out some gibberish for you. And then you can decode it or decrypt it using the same key. That is how encryption and decryption works. In JWT also, even though we are not encrypting, you still need this key over here. That is creating the JWT, signing the JWT, generating the JWT. So was generating this key. Let's create an in-memory variable which has a random string over here called JWT secret. JWTs are very common. If you go to app.100xsteps.com or the code for app.100xsteps.com, you will see there's a top level .n file which has this variable called JWT underscore secret. So even big applications, let's say Next.js applications, they also use JWT. So it's an important concept to know. It is important for you to know what this JWT secret is. And right now we are creating a simple application, but even in more complex applications, you use JWTs. All right, let's create a global variable const JWT underscore secret equal to random Harkirat, I love Kiara, something like this. You can name it whatever you want. Then what do? You create a JWT for the user instead of generating a token. What are we doing? Sign in endpoint. What were we doing pehle? In the sign in endpoint, I was calling the generate token function. That is how we were generating our token. What do we want to do now? We want to convert their username over to a JWT. That is what we want, right? If I go back to the diagram, what are we doing in the sign in endpoint? Converting their username into a JSON web token. That is what we want to do next. How can you do that? Thankfully, there is a library called JSON web tokens. We have already installed it. I can import it at the top. Const JWT equal to require JSON web token. And now I can use a few functions on this JWT library. For example, I can call convert their username over to a JWT. Harkirat, I love Kiara, something like this. You can name it whatever you want. Then what do? You create a JWT for the user instead of generating a token. What are we doing? Sign in endpoint. What were we doing pehle? In the sign in endpoint, I was calling the generate token function. That is how we were generating our token. What do we want to do now? We want to convert their username over to a JWT. That is what we want, right? If I go back to the diagram, what are we doing in the sign in endpoint? Converting their username into a JSON web token. That is what we want to do next. How can you do that? Thankfully, there is a library called JSON web tokens. We have already installed it. I can import it at the top. Const JWT equal to require
Last player standing.
That means the control reached here, username and password were extracted, users was pushed to this global IE, and then finally we got back this, you are signed in. Now let me hit the /sign in endpoint. And what does it return? It returns me the token. If I'm sending the right username and password, if I send the wrong username and password, it says credentials are incorrect. Notice this token now. This token is a JWT. And as I said, anyone can decode it even without the password at the top. This password is used to verify it, but anyone can decode it. If I go to the website jwt.io and paste this specific token, you will see it says username Raman. The thing, it has something extra, ignore for now, but the thing at the top, username Raman, the thing that I had encoded in the JWT. Where did I encode it? In the /sign in endpoint. The thing that I had encoded in the JWT can be decoded by anyone in the world, and that is fine. It is not a problem. It can only be verified by me. So now I expect that jab bhi a request comes to the /me endpoint. What is the /me endpoint? That gives the user some of their own information. This can be similar to a /courses endpoint that gives you all of your courses if you want a course. /todos endpoint that gives you all of your to-dos. Similarly, we have a very simple endpoint /me where what do you have to do? First, you get the token from the headers. I repeat, this part is important. Anyone who wants to hit an authenticated endpoint. What is an authenticated endpoint? Well, you need to have a token. You need to be signed in, only then can you access it. They need to send a token to us in the header. I showed you this a while back on app.authentication.com where the header over there was the cookie. And over here, the header that our website supports is called a token. And then we have to verify. I would have forgotten to be as well, to be honest. Thank you. Thank you for that. If you want to use this schema, can anyone get? I think we're almost here. 8:03. We'll start in a minute. Let me share this slide. Over here, they will look over here. They will like password. The passwords look different, even though the passwords are the same. Even though the password is 123 123 here, 123 123 here. What is stored in the database is different because we added a salt. That is the whole point of a salt. Can you guess? You have to verify this token. Const decoded data equal to JWT dot verify the token using